We're talking about the K2 for spine hump. We're talking about normal compression that happens with aging. Just the downward motion where the discs are getting compressed. Isolating for strength and a relaxation tool. This is all part of what we're doing with the K2. All right, back pain traits. Let's talk about some common denominators with back pain. There is a spine muscle strength versus an abdominal strength. And for years and years and years, probably still today, people, professionals are recommending, or the public feels that it is the core that is weak with back pain. And I must strengthen my core in order to resolve back pain. Well, if you mean by the core all of the muscles that surround the spine, then yes, that is what we're talking about. But when we're talking about core strength, in my mind, it is everything that happens between the pelvis, basically, and the head. So if you mean core strength by let's increase the amount of abdominal work that we're doing, this is actually not shown to be what is most needed for someone with back pain. Stuart McGill out of, I think it's the University of Waterloo in Canada, but his book is Low Back Disorders, has done many studies. He's shown that, in fact, it is the ratio of spine strength to abdominal strength is definitely skewed. So someone with any history of back pain actually has, in general, a much stronger abdominal region than the spine muscles. So we want to balance that out. So again and again and again, we have to focus with someone who has back pain. We must focus on strengthening the spine, not just the abdominals. I don't want to leave the abdominals out by any means, but we need to know that that ratio is skewed. Generally, with back pain, the gluteal strength is also diminished. So anybody who has a history of back pain, the glutes don't like to generally automatically activate. And that's not just the glute med, it includes the glute med and the glute min. So how do we focus on those, and how do we isolate those? It's actually something I don't talk about a lot, isolating muscles. I like to think of the body working globally and not one muscle at a time. You know, I think we've been trained because of, back when I was a kid, and they had Nautilus equipment, and that you would lock yourself into a machine and you would work your biceps, or you would work your triceps. And in fact, those muscles were being somewhat isolated. Certainly many muscles around them were working, but it kind of set up this mindset that we could work muscles individually like that. But in fact, it's not the best way to think about it. We want to think about the whole system working. When we talk about the glute strength, again, we do want to focus on those muscles, and it's very difficult to isolate the glute muscle away from the hamstring, away from the back. But if we can isolate the glute on the K2, what we're actually doing is not isolating it, we're giving it a chance to contract and not let the back and the hamstring muscles take over. Did my slide change? Oh, no, that's not. Okay. Well, I think it did. All right. John, did you switch slides on me?
No.
No, you didn't. Okay, that must have been. All right. And then these are all things that when we're using the K2, these are problems that we're trying to resolve. We're trying to resolve the glute strength issue. We're trying to resolve the spine muscle weakness. And the decompression of the joints is happening with the downward glide of the spine. So the hips are going here, the head is here. We have a slight inversion happening, so decompression and relieving some pressure, those degenerative changes that can be going on. Oh, okay, K2 and elongation. So on the screen, if you're watching the screen, or in your notes, you'll see a little thing there that says rats and cookies. And this is my reminder to myself to tell you about this study. So there's been a lot of really great elongation studies out there, but one of my favorites is the rat and cookie study. And the rat and cookie study is, there was a group of scientists, and they wanted to study the effects of elongation on the spine. And was it lasting? Was the elongation lasting, and did it have a lasting effect? And so they took some rats, and they had their control group of rats, and they put them over here, and they didn't do any elongation with those little guys. And then they took another group of rats and they hung them by their tails. So they hung them by their little tails in midair, and they measured the elongation post-hanging. Okay, they got one result. But then they got another result from rats that were hung by their tail. So let's imagine here is the rat hanging. And then they put a cookie right here for the rat. And the rats were allowed to grab onto the edge of the table, and they pulled with their little fingers, and the scientists pulled away slightly with the tail. And so that was creating a two-way push-pull. And so that actually was the best elongation. So when we practice these exercises on the K2, we always leave cookies. We'd like to always leave cookies just out of your reach. So one of the nicest things to do, if you're able to do it with your shoulders, is to lie on the K2. You can rest your forehead on your hands, or you can reach your arms out in front of you. And if you're doing that, then you're creating that two-way stretch. And of course, if your arms aren't reaching out in front of you, you can still elongate through the top of the head. So if my head is resting on my fingertips, I can still imagine that I'm reaching from my sacrum to the top of my head and get that two-way push-pull. And of course, for those of you who are Pilates instructors, you know that elongation is one of the Pilates principles. And so it's not enough just to do the exercise. It is a lot more to focus on stretching from one end of the system to the other to pull everything back in place. In fact, I read a study yesterday that was about nerve regeneration. And while the elongation that happened with the nerve regeneration was not an exercise, it was still a nerve elongation. And they found that nerves that had a hard time repairing, if they actually went in and they clipped the nerve and then they replaced it in a longer position, it promoted healing. And I don't know if it was, I don't think they know why exactly that happened, but I'm wondering if it set up a system reboot by doing the same thing that we're trying to do when we're standing in elongation. Some variation of that. Okay. Okay, so why do we want spine elongation? Very simply because it creates space between the vertebrae. I'm gonna have to put my glasses on because I can't see my screen. Space between the vertebrae, reduced rotation, and reduced translation to get my spine here. So when we talk about rotation, we can talk about scoliosis because it's a great example of all of that stuff. But it could happen for anyone and everyone. And when we're talking about rotation, we're talking about when you have a convex side of the spine and the spine's processes rotate to look over here at the concavity. That's your rotation of the spine. But we're also talking, yes?
The full video straight.
Oh,
drop the slide so you
okay.
see what you're doing.
Here, okay. There, this will help. Okay, I'll take some glasses for a moment. All right, so one more time. So with scoliosis, we have a side bend, and then it's always accompanied by a rotation, more or less. It can be more rotation or less rotation depending on the human being. So the spinous processes will turn to look at the concavity. So that's rotation. And then the translation is simply how the vertebra slide back and forth one over the other this way. That's going to be the translation. And of course, scoliosis is a great representation of that. However, you can have translation and you can have rotation in someone who doesn't have scoliosis. Scoliosis just makes it super easy to see. Okay, so now let's go back to our file. Should pick up right where we left off. Okay. It is going to reduce the coronal plane change also. So the coronal plane change, that side bend, that even if you don't have scoliosis, you might have a little side bend. It's also just going to pull everything up and long. So elongation. And that last bullet point there, the statics move to a more physiological norm. That is really, really what we're after. We're really after just trying to find that spot where the body already wants to live or was intended to live, more or less, so that the tissues around, the nerves, the blood vessels, the muscles, the connective tissue, can all function more or less the way they were meant to be. Now, when I say that, I don't want you to think that everybody, you know, when you look at an anatomy book and they're like, this is the anatomical norm, and this is Leonardo da Vinci's Vesuvius? What's the guy's name? That guy. You know which guy I'm talking about. Okay, so those really aren't that normal. So, you know, it's kind of like, it's a great, you know, way to say, well, this is a human. And be like, okay, you've never seen it. A lion, this is a lion, this is a human. But to think that every single one of us has the same muscle arrangement or organ arrangement is not realistic. So again, we're going to try and move back to a more physiological norm, meaning not necessarily straight and symmetrical, just closer to them. Okay. Importance of strengthening. So with the K2 and with all of the work that you do, once we've moved back to that more physiologically normal position, we want to strengthen because it's going to provide neuromuscular stimulation. So how many times have you talked to a client or a friend, or maybe you've done it yourself, I certainly have, where maybe you buy an inversion table, or you buy some posture shirt, or you buy something that allows you to return to that better posture, that better position. You're like, great, I got it. I'm inverted, I'm on my inversion table, I'm hanging, things feel great. It's not enough. It feels good, it's fabulous, but it's unfortunately not enough. The body has to be given some sort of information in order to think that it should stay there. Otherwise, it's kind of, unfortunately, like me visiting Hawaii. It's like my body's like totally like, this is totally not where you live, but you can enjoy it while you're here, right? And so in order to convince the body that it's living in this elongated position, then you better give it something to do there. If I was going to live in Hawaii, then I better get a job there. So I better do something once I'm elongated. If I'm on an inversion table, what are you going to do? You could do anything from deep breathing so that the muscles of the torso contract. You could, move your arms a little bit. So it's going to be the same on the K2. It's not just a position to relax in. There has to be something going on there to make a neuromuscular change and stimulation. And of course, it will increase your capacity to hold that more neutral position once you come out of it. So again, if I'm going to elongate, I'm going to want to do something while I'm here in order to inform my body that when I've stopped super elongating, then okay, it's going to be easier to stay here now. My body's going to have some information about how to stay here. And it starts to reset what normal is. So when I first started doing this work, and I know that a lot of people who've done any sort of exercise can certainly attest to the same. If this was more my norm and more my comfortable position, and then I elongate, and then I keep working here and working here and working here, then this position isn't comfortable anymore. It becomes less and less comfortable. So what was normal before becomes less normal. Okay. Importance of breathing. So, of course, it keeps you alive. It's a good thing. The breathing is going to act as a neuromuscular stimulation from the inside out. So having mirrors in a studio or a clinic or a hospital is fantastic because as the practitioner, it saves you a lot of work because people can look in the mirror and go, oh, okay, got it. However, one thing that's really hard for them to get into touch with will be the breathing pattern and to really focus on the breath. So the diaphragm is not simply just a breathing muscle. It is also a major stabilizer of the spine. And of course it is, right? So if you cut me in half right here and took me and put me over here on the table, then you're looking down at my diaphragm and it's just sitting in there, covering all sides, front, side, back, just like a jellyfish and just like a parachute. It's a very large muscle. And when you inhale and that muscle goes down, it pushes out in the entire circumference. So it's a major stabilizer of the spine. It's also a lymphatic pump. So breathing, I think, in general, for our clients, for our patients, needs a little more attention. Not that they necessarily have to understand at a level that you do as therapists, practitioners, but they do need to understand that it's an important part of their practice. And they don't just get to a position and work the biceps, move the extremities, but that the breath has to be a big part of that. And they're going to find that it's a lot easier to make the changes they need to make if they do them. All right, so we are going to take a break right here.